Hello, welcome to Space Freight, a 2 to 5 player resource management game where you mine, trade, and salvage gemstones on your quest for the most gold. I'm Tyler, one of the game designers, and I'll be showing you how to play. The objective of the game is to score the most victory points by the time the gold runs out. The game is simple. You have 2 actions per turn, and you can choose from 7 basic actions. The first possible action is the move action, where you can move from home base to space and everywhere else. Space is between everything, meaning you need to move to space to get somewhere. So for one action, I'll move to space. For a second action, I can move to a planet. To undock from somewhere is also a move action. So I can undock from a planet to space as one action and move from space to the trading exchange as another action. On a side note, if you want to move within the trading exchange, we call it taxiing. That means you can move from one dock in the trading exchange to another dock in the trading exchange in the same move action. If I want to undock from the trading exchange and go somewhere else, that's a move action. Docking in the mission center is another move action. And then if I want to go back home, I would choose one action to go to the space and then another action back to home base. The second possible action is to load or unload from my ship. You can do both loading and unloading in the same action. It just depends what you have in storage. So right now, I start the game with only 1 gold since I'm player 1. So as an action, I can load this gold onto my ship. Now, for example, if I had more resources in my storage, I could load one or multiple of these resources into my ship at once as an action. Say I had 2 of them on board my ship when I came home, I could unload these 2 and then load some of these in the same action. The third possible action you can take is purchasing a card from the buy zone. The buy zone has 6 cards up here at any given time, and they are replaced by drawing cards off the top of the deck and replacing them once one is bought. You can only buy a card from the buy zone if you have resources in your storage that you can buy them with. So right now, we have 1 gold aboard my ship, 2 blue gemstones in my storage, and 2 red gemstones in my storage. So I would need to unload this gold first to get it into my storage, and then take it and pay for it to buy something that costs 1 gold. So right now, the manipulate and hacker both cost 1 gold. I'm gonna grab the hacker. And I'm gonna replace it with the top card of the deck, and there's another boost card. That is one action. If you wanna buy multiple cards, you have to buy them in separate actions. You cannot buy multiple cards in the same action. If I wanted to buy an officer, this one costs 4 blue and 4 green. I don't have the resources for that, so I would have to go out into space, onto planets, onto the trading exchange to get those resources. You cannot buy cards in the buy zone if you don't have resources in your storage. You cannot buy cards with resources on your ship, but you can buy cards at any time. So I can be docked on the green planet, and I can buy cards from the buy zone with resources in my storage. The next possible action you can take during your turn is to perform a crew action. Now there are many different crew actions, and we're going to go over each one. The most basic one, the one you're going to need all game, is the ship capacity. It's the dock workers. Dock workers control how much you can control on your ship at any given time. So I have right now 6 ship capacity since I have 3 dock workers, meaning I can hold 6 resources on my ship. If I go over the capacity by the end of my turn, I need to jettison those resources into space. So for example, if I mine too many resources, let's say I had 8 on here. If I had 8 green gemstones aboard my ship at the end of my turn, I would need to take 2 of these and jettison them into space. Now anyone can pick them up from space by salvaging them. The salvage action is controlled by your scavengers, and they control how many resources you can pick up from space in one action. So let's say I didn't mine these. If I was in space, if I had 1 scavenger, I can salvage 1 gemstone or resource any type of resource from space onto my ship. That just means placing it from space onto my ship. Scrap is scattered throughout space at the beginning of the game, and you can pick them up at any time. Other resources may be available in space depending on if other people had to jettison them from their ship. So these 2 green gemstones, if they're in space, I can pick them up. One at a time though, because I only have 1 scavenger. If I had bought this scavenger from the buy zone, that would mean I have 2 salvage per action. So in 1 turn, I can salvage 2 and then another 2, since I have 2 actions per turn. Let's move on to the miner crew card. The miner crew controls how many mines you get to take per action. Mining is how many resources you can mine from a planet. So mining happens on planets. If I'm on the green planet, I can mine a single gemstone because I have 1 mine per action. If I had 2 miners, I could mine 2 green gemstones in 1 action. If I was on the blue planet, I would be mining blue gemstones. Let's move on to the trade action. The trade action is probably the most complicated career action in the game, and it involves the trading exchange, which is a very critical part of space freight. When you go to the trading exchange, it's recommended that you take gemstones or resources aboard your ship and then dock there. So for example, if I had salvaged 1 scrap and then I used a move action to dock here, if I had 1 trader, that means I can trade once per action or increment or decrement any adjacent D6. Right now, the place where I docked has a favorable trading exchange, so I don't need to increment or decrement the dice. But if I wanted to, I could increment this to 2 in 1 action, and then as another action, I could increment it again, or I could decrement this to 5. Now I don't want to do that. For this action, I'm just going to perform a single trade. To perform a trade, you can take your gemstones aboard your ship and trade them with anything adjacent. So if I had 1 scrap, I can trade it for 6 purple because I'm docked in between these 2 dice. I cannot trade 1 scrap for 2 yellow because that would require me to be there. However, it's important to know that the gold D4 dice is adjacent to everything. So I could trade 1 scrap for 1 gold. That would be 1 action. In a separate action, I can trade 1 gold for 6 purple. Now, I didn't really need to do that since I was already adjacent to the scrap, so I could have just traded 1 scrap for 6 purple in 1 action. Let's taxi to this docking position and trade 6 purple for 5 green. I would want to do this if I only had scrap, but there was something that costs a lot of green in the buy zone. For example, the quartermaster officer. So now I would go to space as 1 action and then fly home as another action. If I wanted to make progress toward buying the quartermaster, I would unload my green gemstones and then try and get 2 more blue gemstones so I have enough resources to purchase the quartermaster. There are 3 other crew in the game that you don't have available to start with. Right now, you only start the game with 3 dock workers, 1 miner, 1 scavenger, and 1 trader. But there are 3 other crew that you can acquire throughout the game from the deck in the buy zone. One of them is, actually 2 of them are out in the buy zone right now, the shapeshifter and the spacemonger. Let's go over the spacemonger. The spacemonger allows you to swap with other players in space. So if I had these 3 scrap and these 2 green gemstones aboard my ship and I was in space, if another player was in space with me and they had a more desirable resource like gold, I could swap with them. If I had 1 spacemonger, that means I can do 2 swaps per action. A swap is a single resource for another resource. So right now I can swap 2 of my resources with 2 of their resources. That's assuming I have the card. So if I wanted to trade these 2 scrap with this player and get 2 gold in return, I could do that. The action is forced and that player cannot counter it in any way. Space is a very dangerous place, and if you have gold aboard your ship, it's recommended that you avoid space when there are other players with space monger crew. It's very threatening. The next crew I want to go over is not in our default set of crew, nor is it in the buy zone right now. We have to look in the deck for it. It is the Saboteur crew member. The Saboteur allows a player to displace another player's ship from a docking station. So if player 2's ship was at home and they were getting ready to unload that gold, I could displace them from their docking station. Again, if I had the crew, if I had bought this Saboteur and had it as part of my crew, I could displace them from that docking station into space. You cannot displace somebody from space to a docking station. It doesn't work like that. They have to already be docked somewhere to displace them. Once they're in space, you can then, lastly, there's a really unique thing you can do with the Saboteurs, and that is displace yourself. So if you had 2 Saboteurs, if you had acquired 2 Saboteurs, you get 2 displaces in one action, meaning if you were at home and the opponent was at home, you could displace both of your ships into space as one action so that you have one more action remaining on your turn to perform any shenanigans that you want to perform in space. The last crew member that can perform an action is the Shapeshifter, which is already out here in the buy zone. It's a very powerful crew member and requires 1 of every resource in the game, except for gold, to buy. As you can see, it costs 1 purple, 1 yellow, 1 blue, 1 red, 1 green, 1 scrap. If I had those resources in my storage, I could buy the Shapeshifter and use it. The Shapeshifter is unique because it can become any crew type, even ones that you don't have, during your turn. So if I didn't have a Space Monger, I could declare it as a Space Monger, and I would have that ability, that crew ability, until the end of my turn. This is especially useful if there's somebody else in space and you want to swap with them, or maybe you're at the trading exchange and you want to get an extra trade per action, or maybe you're on a planet and you want to mine double the amount that you can mine. You can declare as your second miner and mine 2 gemstones per action. And that concludes all of the crew actions, which there are 7 of. The next action you can take in the game is the officer action. Officers are unique because there's only 1 of each of them in the deck, which is different from crew because there are 4, at least 4 of each crew member in the deck. Officers are special because they cost more resources to buy, but they give you permanent, unique abilities that nobody else in the game can get. Let's look at the Quartermaster, for example. It says, as an action from space, unload up to 4 resources from your ship directly to your storage. So if I had purchased the Quartermaster, I would be the only player able to use this ability. And it basically creates an extra specialized action that I can do every turn. For example, if I was in space and I wanted to get this gold home as soon as possible, I could unload 4 resources from my ship into my storage as an action from space. I wouldn't even have to go home. I would be saving multiple actions with the Quartermaster. Officers are also worth 3 victory points each at the end of the game, which is more than crew, which is only worth 1 victory point each at the end of the game. The last card type that we have to cover are boosts, which are these cards. They're all unique. There's 18 different unique boost cards in the deck, and they do really cool things, but you do them one time. Officers, you save them through the rest of the game. Boosts, you buy them as an action, and then in a separate action, you use them. Let's look at Pay Dirt. While docked on a planet, mine gemstones once at your current capacity level instead of your current mining level, then discard this card and take an extra action. If I had already bought Pay Dirt, I could then choose to use this. Remember, it takes an action to use a boost card. I could choose to use this if I was on a planet. So if I was here, I can mine gemstones once at my current capacity level, which is 6. So I can mine 6 green gemstones as part of this boost action. Fortunately, every boost gives you an extra action after you play. So now I can go to space, and that would be the end of my turn. Once you play a boost, you cannot use it again. It is discarded and cannot be bought or used for the rest of the game. The final action in Space Freight that you can take is to resolve a mission. Missions require a delivery of resources in exchange for a payment of 6 or 8 gold, depending on the mission that you solve. This mission requires 3 blue and 3 yellow to be delivered in exchange for 6 gold. This mission requires 2 yellow, 2 purple, and 2 scrap to be delivered in exchange for 8 gold. I would have to dock at the mission center with the required resources aboard my ship in order to resolve the mission. Resolving the mission is an action. So I would dock there as an action, resolve this mission, which means I get to take the tile, save it for a victory point for the end of the game, trade these resources in, I'm gonna put them back in the resource bin, and then get 8 gold aboard my ship. Remember that any extra resources aboard your ship at the end of your turn have to go into space if you do not have the capacity to hold them. Because I only have 6 capacity with my 3 dock workers, if this was the end of my turn, I would have to jettison 2 resources into space. Let's talk about the ending of the game. The game of Space Freight ends when all gold is away from the resource bin and in player's storage. So if it's still aboard your ship, like if this player was still playing and the gold was still aboard their ship and not in storage, the game would continue on. All gold has to be in storage for the game to end. Once the game ends, you tally up all of your victory points and the player with the most victory points wins. There are 4 different ways to count victory points. Gold counts as 1 victory point at the end of the game. Each crew member counts as 1 victory point at the end of the game. Each officer counts as 3 victory points at the end of the game. And each mission counts as 1 victory point at the end of the game. Unused boost cards do not count towards victory points at the end of the game. So if this was the end of the game, I would tally up my score like this. I would have 2, 4, 6, 8 gold. That's 8 victory points. 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15 for crew. Plus 3 for the officer, that's 18. Plus 1 for the mission, that's 19 victory points. In the case of a tie, the player with the most unused boost cards wins.